Please like, share, and subscribe. Wishing you happiness and good luck every day.
So, what if everything you think you know about negotiation is just wrong? What if it's not some rational, logical game of chess, but a deeply emotional, psychological puzzle? We're about to break down the incredible insights from former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. You're going to see why a street cop's simple questions completely baffled Harvard's best and brightest, and more importantly, how you can use these same tactics in your own life.
Now get this, that wasn't a real kidnapper on the phone. That was a Harvard law professor. See, Chris Voss spent 2 decades as the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. He'd gone face-to-face with terrorists, bank robbers, people where the stakes were literally life and death. And now here he was, in a classroom, about to go head-to-head with the world's top academic minds. Their theory was about to collide with his reality. What you've got here is a total clash of philosophies. On one side, you have the FBI. Their techniques weren't born in a lecture hall. They were forged in real-life high-stakes crises. It was all about street smarts, experience, and being emotionally tuned in. And on the other side, Harvard, the home of negotiation theory, built on pure logic, reason, and concepts like BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, basically your plan B. It was a real battle of gut instinct versus textbook theory.
So the scene is set, right? 2 Harvard professors are playing the kidnappers against 1 FBI negotiator, and they think they've got him completely cornered. They make this logical, brute force demand, give us the money or else. But Voss, well, he didn't play their game. He didn't make a counteroffer. He didn't argue. He changed the entire field of play.
This was his secret weapon. Not some brilliant argument, but a simple, open-ended question. How am I supposed to do that? This is what Voss calls a calibrated question. It's designed to make your problem their problem to solve. Instead of reacting to their threat, he forced these brilliant professors to stop and actually think. Suddenly, the people who thought they had all the power were stumped, trying to solve his dilemma. And just like that, the entire dynamic of the conversation shifted.
So why on earth did such a simple question work so well? Well, the answer lies deep inside our brains. It's just how we're all wired. You see, Voss's question wasn't aimed at the logical part of their minds. Nope, it was targeting the real decision maker, the hidden boss that's in all of our heads. And to get this, we've got to look at the work of Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman.
So here's the deal. Kahneman figured out that we basically have 2 systems of thought. System 2 is the one we think is in charge. It's our slow, logical, rational mind. It's the part that does your taxes or writes an email. But the real power, the real power, belongs to System 1. That's our fast, instinctive, and deeply emotional animal mind. It's that gut feeling you get. It's what makes you flinch at a loud noise. And it is way more influential than we realize, constantly steering our so-called rational thoughts.
And this is the absolute key to everything. Traditional negotiation, the kind they were teaching at Harvard, assumes we're all rational beings. It's all aimed at System 2. But the FBI figured out that that's like trying to make an omelet without cracking the egg. It just doesn't work. Our feelings, our System 1 gut reactions, they're the source code for our rational thought. If you want to influence someone's decision, you have to start with their emotions, period.
This discovery led the FBI to a brand new guiding principle. And it's not sympathy. That's just feeling sorry for someone. It's empathy, specifically tactical empathy. This is the skill of understanding where the other person is coming from, their perspective and their emotions, not to agree with them, but to influence them. It's about seeing the world through their eyes. And it's the foundation for every single tool we're about to cover.
All right, let's get practical. The first technique is so simple it almost feels like cheating. It's called mirroring, and I'm telling you, it's one of the fastest ways to build a connection and get someone to open up, often without them even realizing what you're doing.
You know how we're all just instinctively drawn to people who are like us? Well, mirroring taps right into that. And we're not talking about mimicking their accent or their body language, nothing weird like that. You simply repeat the last few important words they just said, but you say it like a question. This triggers this deep biological response that says, hey, we're on the same page. You can trust me. And when people feel that trust, they start talking. They'll give you more and more information.
Okay, let's see how this works in the real world. One of Voss's students had a boss who had just dropped these urgent, last-minute tasks on her desk. One day, he says, let's make 2 copies of all the paperwork. Now, this meant a solid week of boring, mindless work. Instead of arguing, she used these steps. First, she used that calm, late-night FM DJ voice. Then she said, "I'm sorry, 2 copies?" Just mirroring him. He paused, then explained, "Yeah, one for us and one for the customer." She mirrored again. "I'm sorry, so you're saying the client is asking for a copy?" After a few more mirrors and just letting the silence hang there, the boss literally negotiated with himself and realized that digital backups were fine. And boom, a week of work just gone.
And you've got to remember, tools like mirroring weren't invented in some cozy business school seminar. They were designed, tested, and perfected in the real world, in situations where building trust wasn't just about closing a deal, it was about saving a life. This is emotional intelligence on steroids.
Okay, so building on that foundation of tactical empathy, we get to our next tool, labeling. This is all about giving a voice to your counterpart's emotions. It's a way to call out the underlying feelings that are driving their behavior, and when you do that, you can diffuse all that negativity before it blows up.
Here's the magic. When you give an emotion a name, you validate it. You show the other person that you're listening, that you actually understand them. And this is wild. Brain scans have shown that when we label an emotion, the activity in our brain literally shifts from the emotional, fear-driven parts to the more rational thinking parts. So just naming a negative feeling actually dials down its intensity.
And these are the magic words. You always start with phrases like, "it seems like," or "it sounds like." Notice you're not saying what your feeling is or "I think you're angry." Starting with "I" just makes people defensive. But these phrases, they're just neutral observations. It seems like you're frustrated with this whole process. And after you say the label, the most important thing you can possibly do is just be quiet. Let it land. Let them respond. They'll either agree or they'll correct you. But either way, you're learning more about what's really going on in their head.
Okay, so labeling general emotions, super powerful. But what happens when you're the reason they're angry? What if they have a whole list of complaints about you? This is where labeling turns into a genuine superpower for de-escalating conflict. It's called an accusation audit. You literally list out all the worst things the other person might be thinking or saying about you, and then you say them first. It completely takes the sting out of their attack. Voss's student Anna had to renegotiate this tough contract. So before the meeting, she listed all their potential complaints. Then, she started the conversation by calmly labeling them. "It seems like you feel we've taken advantage of you. It seems like you feel we haven't been a good partner." By hitting those negatives head-on, she disarmed them, cleared the air, and created the space for a real conversation that ended up saving our company $1 million. So, when you start putting all these pieces together, you realize this isn't just a new way to negotiate. It completely reframes the entire purpose. It's not a battle of wits or a fight you have to win anymore. It becomes a process of discovery and connection.
So what are the big takeaways here? First, just recognize that life is basically one long negotiation. Your goal isn't to win an argument, it's to discover information. Always remember you're dealing with that emotional, instinctive animal mind. Use mirroring to build that connection. And use labeling to show people that you get it, that you understand where they're coming from.
At the end of the day, it all boils down to a really simple truth. These aren't just tricks for hostage situations or big corporate deals. This is about being better at interacting with other humans. Whether you're trying to get your kid to go to bed, asking for a raise, or buying a new car, it's all just communication with results. It's about getting what you want out of life by getting what you want with other people. By shifting your whole mindset from battle to discovery, you open up this entirely new world of possibilities. You're not just trying to get your way anymore. You're trying to understand the other person's world. And when you do that, you don't just get better deals, you build better relationships. So the only real question is, what will you discover? When you hear the word negotiation, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably compromise, right? Meet in the middle, split the difference. But what if I told you that gut instinct is probably costing you? That splitting the difference might actually be the worst thing you can do? Well, let's get into it.
See, the ideas we're going to talk about today, they don't come from some stuffy business school class. Nope. They come straight from the high-stakes playbook of Chris Voss, the FBI's former lead international hostage negotiator. This is a guy who negotiated with terrorists for a living. In his world, the stakes are literally life and death.
And that really brings us to the core question here. When you and I meet in the middle, are we both winning? Or are we both just taking the easy way out and settling for a pretty lazy outcome? The whole idea we're digging into is that compromise is actually a failure. It's a massive missed opportunity to find a much, much better deal. So let's just go ahead and completely dismantle this myth of compromise.
We're all taught that negotiation is this, rational back-and-forth dance with numbers. But when things actually matter, whether it's your job or something way bigger, relying on pure logic just doesn't cut it.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures the mindset. I mean, the subtitle of the book says it all. Think about it. If a kidnapper has 2 hostages and you want to free them both, do you split the difference and say, okay, just give me one? Absolutely not. You need a totally different set of tools.
The old way, the way we've all been taught, it basically frames negotiation as a zero-sum game, a battle of wills. You start on opposite sides, and whoever gives up less is the winner. But what really happens is that both sides walk away feeling like they lost something, leaving a ton of value just sitting there on the table.
Okay, so if logic isn't the answer, then what is? This is where everything shifts. The new rules for negotiation aren't about overpowering the other person. They're about deeply understanding them. The real goal is influence, and the road to get there is through empathy.
Which brings us to this monster of a concept, tactical empathy. Now, this isn't about agreeing with someone or trying to be their best friend, not at all. It's a skill. It's the ability to get a read on their perspective, what they're afraid of, what they really want, so you can actually influence what happens next.
And let's be super clear about the difference here, because it's huge. Sympathy is feeling for them. It's saying, oh, I feel so sorry for you. Tactical empathy is understanding with them. It's demonstrating, I see where you're coming from. One is just an emotion. The other is a powerful tool for building trust and gathering information.
Okay, so that's the big picture mindset. Now let's get down to brass tacks. How do you actually do this stuff? We're going to walk through 3 incredibly simple but seriously powerful tools you can start using today, pulled straight from the FBI's playbook.
First up is mirroring. It's so simple it almost sounds silly. You just repeat the last few important words your counterpart just said. I know, it sounds too simple to work, right? But what it does psychologically is trigger this deep-seated human need for connection. It sends a signal that says, hey, I'm listening, which makes the other person feel safe enough to keep talking and reveal more.
So for example, if someone tells you, this project has a very tight budget, all you do is repeat back, with a questioning tone, a very tight budget? That's it. You're not agreeing, you're not arguing, you're just creating a little space. And almost every time, they will jump in to elaborate and explain why it's so tight, giving you crucial info. Next up is labeling. This one is like a verbal magic trick. You simply call out the emotion you're hearing from your counterpart. By putting a name to their feeling, you validate it. And what happens in their brain is that the emotional, reactive part starts to calm down, and the rational, thinking part kicks in. It de-escalates tension almost instantly. Now, how you say it is everything. You always start with phrases like, it seems like, or it sounds like. This frames it as your observation, not an accusation. Saying it seems like you're feeling frustrated lands a whole lot better than just saying you're frustrated. And finally, we have calibrated questions. The whole goal here is to create the illusion of control. You want to ask specific, open-ended questions that make the other person feel like they're the one in the driver's seat, even though you're actually the one steering the conversation.
So here's the game-changing idea. Instead of making demands that just create conflict, you ask questions that invite them to collaborate. You completely shift the dynamic from a head-to-head confrontation into a side-by-side problem-solving session where they willingly start offering up solutions.
These questions are your secret weapons. You'll notice they can't be answered with a simple yes or no. A question like, how am I supposed to do that, is brilliant because it forces the other person to actually stop and consider your side of the problem, and often they'll be the ones to adjust their own demands.
So we've got the tools, but what's the end game here? It's not just about getting a better price on a car, not by a long shot. This is about fundamentally changing the way you communicate and influence people in literally every single part of your life.
All right, get ready for a bit of a mind bender here. We are all trained our entire lives to chase the yes, but Voss argues that no is actually where the real negotiation starts. A no isn't failure. A no means the other person feels safe and in control enough to be honest with you. It's an opportunity to learn.
And this right here, this is the real mic drop moment. The instant of a true breakthrough in any negotiation isn't when they finally agree to what you want. It's the moment when you've so perfectly summarized their position, their feelings, their entire world, that they just look at you and say, that's right. That is when you know you have their complete trust.
So, I'll leave you with this. Negotiation isn't about accepting the reality you're given. It's about shaping it. The very next time you're in a conversation that matters, just try one of these tools. Don't go hunting for a yes. Instead, listen for that golden moment when you can get them to say, "That's right." So how are you going to bend their reality?
So, what if I told you that the best negotiation tactics on the planet didn't come from a fancy Harvard classroom, but from the front lines of life-or-death hostage situations? Well, today we're diving into the absolute game-changing lessons from Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference. It's a book that takes everything you think you know about negotiation and just flips it right on its head. Just imagine getting a call like that. It's the kind of thing that just stops your heart. And that exact demand was made to Chris Voss, who was, at the time, the FBI's top international kidnapping negotiator. But here's the crazy part. The guy on the other end of the phone? He wasn't some hardened criminal. Nope. He was a Harvard law professor. You heard that right. This whole thing wasn't a real kidnapping. It was an ambush, a surprise role-playing exercise set up right there, inside the famous halls of Harvard University. The whole point was to see what would win, the FBI's gritty, field-tested tactics or the world's most sophisticated, academically proven strategies. It was the ultimate battle of street smarts versus book smarts. So, in one corner, you've got Chris Voss. He's a former beat cop from Kansas City who worked his way up to become the FBI's #1 guy for international kidnappings. And in the other corner, you have Robert Mnookin and Gabriella Blum. We're talking heavy hitters from Harvard Law, people who literally wrote the books on this stuff. So on paper, you'd think this was going to be a total blowout for the academics. And this is really the heart of it all. The Harvard team walked in armed with logic, this core belief that negotiation is this rational process where you just separate the people from the problem. But Voss knew from years of experience that when the stakes are high, you can't separate emotion from the problem. In fact, emotion is the only path to a real solution. Okay, so you've got this demand on the table, $1 million or his son dies. What does Voss do? He doesn't come back with a counteroffer. He doesn't argue. He doesn't do any of the stuff you'd expect. Instead, he uses this single, brilliant question that completely pulls the rug out from under his opponents. And that was it. That was the question. "I'm sorry, Robert, but how can I get you any money right now if I don't even know he's alive?" Just think about what he's doing there. He's not saying no. He's not picking a fight. He's actually asking for help. He's gently handing the problem right back to them, and in doing so, he changes the entire dynamic of the conversation. This move has a name, and it's called a calibrated question. These are these amazing open-ended questions that just make the other person stop, think, and start working on your problems for you. When you ask something like, "How am I supposed to do that?" you're basically inviting them into your world, making them your partner in finding a way out. And, a way out that's going to lean in your favor. And the effect was immediate. It was like a chain reaction. That one question turned what was a confrontation into a team effort. All of a sudden, these brilliant Harvard professors weren't making threats. They were totally stumped by a simple logistical problem. They started negotiating against themselves, they got frustrated, and their whole rational game plan just fell apart. The result? Voss, the street cop, walked away the winner. So, the big question is, why did the world's best academic theory just crash and burn like that? Well, the answer comes down to a really basic misunderstanding of how our brains actually work. It's that classic battle of the heart versus the mind. You see, for years, the old school model, which came out of Harvard, was called getting to yes. It's a great system, but it's based on this one big idea, that humans are rational. But the new school, the one forged by the FBI in the real world, is all about what Voss calls tactical empathy. And it starts with the complete opposite assumption, that people are, at their core, irrational, emotional animals. And this isn't just a guess. It's backed by Nobel Prize-winning science. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman showed us that we basically have two systems running in our heads. System 1 is our gut. It's fast, it's emotional, it's our animal mind. System 2 is our logical brain. It's slow and careful. And we all like to think that System 2 is the one in the driver's seat, but, well, we'd be wrong. And here's the absolute crucial point. Our feelings aren't some distraction from our rational thoughts. They're actually the engine behind them. Our emotional System 1 is always guiding and steering our logical System 2. So if you can figure out how to understand and influence someone's feelings, you can actually guide their logical conclusions. And that is exactly what Voss's question did. Now, the FBI didn't just stumble onto this idea by accident. They were actually forced to ditch the old rational models after a whole series of terrible, high-profile disasters where pure logic and problem-solving were absolutely useless against raw, powerful emotion. This whole shift took place over decades. After disasters in the 70s, negotiation actually became mandatory. Then, in the 80s, law enforcement across the board adopted getting to yes. But the 1993 Waco siege, that was the breaking point. Trying to find a logical win-win solution with a messianic cult leader was a complete and fatal error. It proved once and for all that the old rational model was broken. They had to start from scratch. And out of that reinvention came the FBI's new guiding principle, tactical empathy. I love how Voss describes this. He calls it listening as a martial art. It's not about being nice. It's not about agreeing with the other person. It's about showing them that you deeply understand their feelings and their worldview so that you can build trust and ultimately influence what they do next. Okay, so at this point, you're probably thinking, this is all pretty fascinating, but I don't exactly negotiate with terrorists for a living. But here's the secret. These exact same high-stakes ideas apply directly to your own life pretty much every single day. The big idea here is that life is a negotiation. Almost any time you interact with another person and you want something, that's a negotiation. From your job to your family, your ability to get what you want really comes down to these skills. I mean, just think about how often this comes up. Asking for a raise, that's a negotiation. Instead of just saying, I deserve more money, you could ask a calibrated question like, how can I be involved in projects that are most valuable to the company? Buying a car, for sure. Or trying to get your toddler to go to bed, let me tell you, that is one of the toughest negotiations you will ever face. These tactics are designed for all of it. So it all kind of boils down to this really powerful idea. Negotiation isn't about fighting or beating someone into submission. It's just about effective communication that gets you results. More often than not, the world is actually set up for you to get what you ask for. You just have to know the right way to ask. And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about. Every single day, you're asking for things, big and small. You are constantly negotiating your way through life. So the only question left is, are you asking correctly? What if you could totally change the game in any conversation? I'm talking about everything from a massive business deal to just, a simple disagreement with your boss. And what if you could do it using the exact same techniques as an FBI hostage negotiator? Well, today, that's what we're going to break down. We're going to dive into the story of a negotiator whose first day on the job was literally a trial by fire. Imagine hearing those words. A bank robber has just put a gun in a teller's mouth and pulled a trigger on an empty chamber. That terrifying click echoes through the bank, and just like that, a crisis is born. So picture this. It's a crisp autumn morning at a Chase Manhattan bank in Brooklyn. It starts out looking like your classic run-of-the-mill bank robbery, but things are about to go very, very wrong. This standoff becomes the first big test for a young FBI negotiator named Chris Voss. I mean, for almost 20 years, New York City hadn't seen anything like this. And now, all of a sudden, he's the guy in the hot seat. So when Voss and this huge law enforcement team show up, they think they've got it all figured out. The word on the street is that the robbers just want to surrender. But oh boy, are they about to get a brutal lesson in why you should never, ever assume. Turns out that whole surrender thing, it was a total lie, a trick planted by the lead robber just to buy himself more time. He was feeding them all this misinformation, saying he had this big international crew with him, making himself sound like he was just a minor player. The reality? Their entire picture of the situation was basically a fantasy. So why do so many negotiations, or even just regular arguments, totally fall apart? Well, Voss says it's because most of us aren't actually listening. Not really. We're way too busy fighting a battle with the voice inside our own head. And this slide right here shows you the huge difference. On one side, you've got that battle mindset. That's when we're just laser focused on our own points, just waiting for our turn to talk. But then, on the other side, that's the discovery mindset. And here, the goal isn't to win. It's to find out everything you possibly can. Voss has a name for this. He calls it a state of schizophrenia. It looks like two people talking, right? But it's actually four. There's you and the voice in your head, and there's them and the voice in their head. All four of you are talking at once, and absolutely no one is listening. So here's the absolute key. The real goal is to quiet all those voices down. And you do that by making the other person your one and only focus. You want to make them feel so safe, so understood, that they just start giving you the information you need. Okay, so 5 hours have passed, and they've gotten nowhere with the robber. Finally, they put Voss on the phone. And his first move? It's not some clever argument, it's not a threat. It's just a simple, super strategic change in his tone of voice. You basically have 3 tones to work with. First, there's the assertive voice. Just forget that one. It just makes people defensive. Your go-to, your default, should be the positive and playful voice. Light, easygoing. But for a really tense moment, you pull out the late-night FM DJ voice. Slow, calm, with a downward inflection. It just radiates confidence and makes people feel safe. The robber was used to talking to another negotiator named Joe, so he's a little thrown off. He asks, "Hey, what happened to Joe?" Now, Voss doesn't ask permission. He just uses that calm, downward-inflecting DJ voice and states a fact. It's not a question. It's the new reality. Done deal. So Voss has the robber's attention now. But to really break this thing open, he uses a technique that is so simple, it honestly feels like a Jedi mind trick. It's called mirroring. All you do is repeat the last 1 to 3 important words that someone just said. It works because it taps into a really basic human instinct. We are drawn to things that are similar to us. So when you mirror someone, you're sending this subconscious signal that says, "Hey, I get you. You can trust me." And it makes them want to just keep talking. At one point, Voss is pressing the robber about a van they found on the street. And the robber, he gets all flustered and just blurts out that his getaway driver took off. And this is it. This is the technique in action. Voss doesn't argue with him, he doesn't deny it, he just calmly mirrors the robber's last few words and turns them into a question. The effect? It was immediate. The robber just starts vomiting information, as Voss puts it, spilling details about accomplices they didn't even know existed. Now, you might be thinking this is only for crazy hostage situations, right? Well, get this. A study found that waiters who simply mirrored their customers' orders back to them saw their tips go up by 70%. 70! That's compared to waiters who used positive reinforcement, like saying, "Great choice." It just works because it makes people feel heard. So, the bank robbery, it did end peacefully, all thanks to these techniques. But this stuff isn't just for hostage negotiators. So let's talk about how you can use these exact same tools in your life. We'll even apply them to a common office nightmare. Oh, we've all had this boss, right? The one who swings by your desk with some urgent task that's totally half-baked and is going to create a week of useless work for you. And you know that if you argue, they're just going to dig in their heels. So what do? Here is your 5-step playbook. First, use that calm, late-night DJ voice. Second, you start soft with, "I'm sorry." It just shows respect. Third, you mirror their words. So, if they say, "I need 2 copies," you say, "I'm sorry, 2 copies?" Now, number 4 is the secret weapon. Be silent. Wait at least 4 seconds. Just let the mirror do its work. They'll start talking again, re-explaining, and a lot of times they solve the problem themselves. If not, you just do it again. And if you're wondering if this really works, here's a direct quote from one of Voss's students. Her boss wanted 2 paper copies of thousands of documents. So by calmly mirroring his requests, 2 copies, store them anywhere, he eventually talked himself down to just creating 2 digital backups. She saved herself an entire week of work. All right, let's just recap the big lessons here. First, stop thinking of negotiation as a battle. It's all about discovery. Second, slow it down. Your voice can completely change the vibe in a room. And mirroring, it's your secret weapon for building trust and getting people to open up. Remember, the ultimate goal isn't to be right, it's to make the other person feel truly, deeply understood. So I'll leave you with this question. Think about that difficult conversation you've been putting off, or that argument that always feels like hitting a brick wall. What do you think would happen if you stopped planning your attack and instead you just listened? Just focused on really hearing what the other person is trying to say. The answer might totally surprise you.
Have you ever been in a conversation that just felt impossible? Well, today we're going to dig into some incredible tools from former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss that can totally transform those difficult moments, whether you're in a boardroom or just arguing over the dinner table. Let's get right into it. So, we're going to start with a story, a situation where all the usual negotiation playbooks were completely useless. A real crisis where one wrong move, one wrong word could have been absolutely devastating.
I want you to picture this. It's 1998 in Harlem. We're in a high-rise apartment building, way up on the 27th floor, standing in this narrow, super tense hallway.
And inside that apartment, there are at least 3 fugitives, and they are armed to the teeth. I mean, just a few days earlier, they were in a gang shootout with automatic weapons. There is absolutely zero room for error here.
So the whole area is completely locked down. You've got SWAT teams stacked up right there in the hallway, snipers on the roofs of the buildings all around, their sights trained on the windows. I mean, this is a total powder keg, just waiting for a spark.
You know, all the standard negotiation books tell you to separate the people from the problem. But what do you do when the people's emotions, their fear, their anger, their paranoia, are the problem? In a situation like this, emotions aren't just an obstacle, they're the entire battlefield.
For 6 straight hours, there was nothing but silence from that apartment. 6 hours. And what finally broke the deadlock wasn't some new demand or a show of force. No, it was something completely different. Something you would probably never expect. Empathy.
And that brings us to this core idea, tactical empathy. Now, this is not about being nice. It's not about agreeing with the other person. It's simply about understanding where they're coming from, their feelings, their mindset, in that specific moment, so that you can actually influence what happens next.
And this is a really, really important distinction. Empathy is just seeing the world through their eyes and saying it out loud. Sympathy is saying, yeah, I agree with you. You don't have to agree with someone to show them you understand them. And that difference, it's everything.
And get this. This isn't just some abstract, feel-good idea. It's hardwired into our biology. Scientists at Princeton found that when you're truly listening to someone, your brain activity literally starts to sync up with theirs. They call it neural resonance. It means you're so tuned in, you can almost anticipate what they're going to say next.
Okay, so that's the what, tactical empathy. But how you actually do it? Well, the single most powerful technique is something called labeling. And it's a beautifully simple 3-step process. First, you just listen and try to spot the emotion behind their words. Second, you label it. You just say it out loud. And third, and this is the most important part, you shut up. You pause, and you let that label sink in. So what did this sound like outside that apartment door for 6 hours? It sounded like this. Not, you're worried we're going to, but it seems like you're worried that if you open the door, we'll come in with guns blazing. Or it looks like you don't want to go back to jail. See how soft that is? It's not an accusation, it's an observation. And the effect this has on the brain is just wild. A UCLA study showed that when you verbally label a negative emotion, like fear, you actually shift the other person's brain activity away from the amygdala, that's the reactive, emotional fight-or-flight center, and over to the calm, rational prefrontal cortex. You are literally de-escalating their brain for them. Okay, ready to level up. This next one is a master-level technique. It's about calling out all the negative things the other person might be thinking about you before they even get a chance to say them. It's called an accusation audit. So let me give you a real-world example. A student named Anna had to go into a $1 million negotiation and deliver some really bad news. Before the meeting, she sat down and just listed out every single bad thing the other side could possibly be thinking about her and her company. So when the meeting started, she didn't wait for them to attack. She led with it. She basically said all the terrible things they were thinking right to their faces. By saying the worst things first, she took all the poison out of the room. It's like taking the sting out of a jellyfish before it can get you. And the result? It was incredible. It totally flipped the script. The other side immediately softened up and actually started defending her. They said, no, we don't feel that way at all. She disarmed the whole situation and turned a potential fight into a problem-solving session.
Okay, so this stuff works in a hostage standoff, and it works in a $1 million deal. But what about for, us? In our everyday lives. Let's look at how all these pieces can come together in a situation we can probably all relate to.
Let's paint a picture. You're at the airport. A guy named Ryan desperately needs to get on a flight that is completely sold out, and he walks up to the gate agent right after she's just been totally screamed at by an angry couple. You'd think his timing couldn't be worse, right? Well, what if it's actually the perfect opportunity? So Ryan walks up, and what's the first thing he does? He doesn't even mention his flight. He talks about her problem.
He just uses a simple label to show he saw what just happened. It seems like they were pretty upset. Boom! Instant connection. He's on her side.
After listening to her for a moment, then he makes his request. But listen how he does it. He labels her reality first. It seems like this flight is likely booked solid. He's showing he gets it, and only then does he gently slide in his request. He acknowledges her problem before he asks for her help, and the result? He got the last seat on that plane.
All right, that was a lot, I know. We went from a Harlem high-rise to a crowded airport gate. So let's just boil all this down to the key things you can actually walk away with and use. First, just try to genuinely imagine what it's like to be them. Second, label their fears. Say them out loud. It takes all their power away. Third, if you have to have a tough conversation, start with an accusation audit. Say the worst things about yourself first. And last, and this is a big one, after you do any of these things, just pause. Be quiet. Let the silence do the work for you. At the end of the day, these aren't just tricks to get your way. They're tools to really truly understand another person. Because real influence only ever comes after understanding. So I'll just leave you with this question. What's one fear in a coworker, in your partner, maybe even in yourself, that you could label and bring out into the open tomorrow? All right, let's talk about something, a superpower really, that most of us are taught our entire lives to run away from. And it's just a simple two-letter word, no. We're going to dive into how flipping our perspective on this one little word can totally transform our negotiations, our ability to influence, and yeah, even just our day-to-day chats. Oh, you totally know this feeling, right? The phone rings, it's always right at dinner time, it's a telemarketer. They absolutely destroy your name, then they just launch into this script and start trapping you with these questions. Do you believe clean air is important? And you're like, well, yeah, of course, but you can literally feel your shoulders tense up, you get defensive, you feel like prey, don't you? It's because you're being herded down this yes pattern, and every single instinct in your body is just screaming, get me out of here. And this quote, it just nails why that feels so awful. When someone's pushing you for a yes, even if you're agreeing with something totally obvious, it feels like you're losing ground, right? It feels like a trap, because, well, it is a trap. Your gut reaction is just to say no to protect yourself, just to get back even a tiny bit of control. So that brings us to our first big idea here, the uncomfortable yes. This is the fundamental problem with so many of those old-school sales tactics. They're all about racing to yes as fast as they can, but they completely ignore that defensive, backed-into-a-corner feeling they're creating in you.
You know, the story we're all fed is that no is rejection. No means you failed. It's the conversation slamming into a brick wall. So we're taught to do everything we can to avoid hearing it, and we're definitely afraid to say it ourselves, because who wants to seem difficult? That's just the conventional wisdom. But here's the complete game changer, this breakthrough idea from former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss. For the absolute pros, the best in the business, no isn't the end, it's the start of the conversation. Seriously, no is pure gold. It's an opportunity to figure out what someone really wants by first letting them tell you what they don't want. Okay, so how on earth does that work? How does a word that feels like a total shutdown actually become a doorway? Well, it's all about reframing it. You stop seeing no as this personal rejection and start seeing it as a chance to just learn more. And what's so cool is that this is actually Chris Voss's own story. When he was trying to become a hostage negotiator, the team leader, a woman named Amy Bondereau, just hit him with one no after another. No, you don't have the training. No, you don't have the experience. But here's the thing. Instead of shutting him down, her no's actually showed him the way forward. They literally carved out the path for the one yes that would change everything. Go volunteer at a suicide hotline. Her no was the beginning of his journey.
All right, let's get into the psychology behind this because it's fascinating. Why is it so incredibly powerful to give someone permission to say no? Well, it all boils down to our most basic, primal human drives.
Deep down, we are all driven by two things, the need to feel safe and secure and the need to feel in control. Think about it. Pushing for a yes is a direct threat to both of those. But what happens when you give them the right to say no? Bam, you satisfy both needs instantly. They feel safe, they feel in control, and it's only then, once those needs are met, that they can actually relax and listen to what you have to say. This means we have to totally reframe what no even means in our heads. It is almost never a final game-over decision. It's more like a placeholder. It could just mean,
hey, I'm not ready to agree yet, or you're kind of making me uncomfortable, or I just need more info. Your job isn't to get bummed out by it. It's to get curious and dig in to figure out what's really going on.
Okay, let's flip this on its head. If no is so valuable, what about yes? Well, it turns out not all yeses are the same. In fact, most of them are kind of worthless. And one of them is actually dangerous. So here's the breakdown. First, you've got the counterfeit yes. That's just an easy escape route for someone who wants you to go away. Then there's the confirmation yes, which is just a simple with zero promise of action. The one you're actually after, the only one that matters, is the commitment yes. That's the real deal, the one that leads to action. And the mistake we all make? We chase any kind of yes without realizing we're usually just getting the fake ones.
And Voss learned this lesson the hard way. Early on, working at that suicide hotline, he thought he absolutely nailed a call. He skillfully backed this person into a corner until they finally said yes. He was proud, but his supervisor came over and told him that was one of the worst calls I ever heard. Why? Because Voss owned the solution, not the caller. The person on the line was just giving him a counterfeit yes to get him off the phone. And that's the huge insight here. The goal isn't for them to agree with you, it's for them to come to the conclusion themselves.
Okay, so the theory is awesome, but how do we actually put this stuff into practice? Let's dive into some super simple but powerful ways you can start using no right now.
This is a perfect example. A political fundraising group tested 2 different scripts. The first one is that classic yes trap we talked about. Do you believe gas prices are too high? Yes. Do you believe we need change? Yes. But look at the second one. It does the complete opposite. It asks questions that are designed to get a no, like, are you going to sit and watch without a fight? See how that empowers the person? It lets them define their own position by saying no. And the result? I mean, get this. This script that was designed to get a no had a 23% higher donation rate. That's not a small difference, that is massive. And it proves this isn't just some clever trick, it is a fundamentally better way to communicate with people.
Okay, here's something you and I can both change today. We have all said this. Do you have a few minutes to talk? It sounds polite, right? But what it really does is put the other person on the defensive immediately. Their brain hears sales pitch coming and their guard goes right up.
But now, check out this simple little switch. Instead, you say, is now a bad time to talk? This question is designed for them to say no. It gives them an easy out, which makes them feel, you guessed it, safe and in control. And you know what the most common response is? No, it's fine, what's up? And just like that, boom, you have their undivided attention. The difference is just incredible.
All right, what if you're dealing with someone who just won't engage? They're giving you nothing. Here's a more advanced move. You can actually provoke a no just to get them talking. You can intentionally mislabel one of their emotions or desires. So let's say they obviously love their job. You could say something like, so it seems like you're really eager to find a new job. They can't help but correct you. They'll say, no, that's not it at all. And boom, just like that, they're in the conversation.
And last but not least, a problem every single one of us has dealt with. You send that important email, you follow up, and you get absolute silence. Crickets. So how do you break through and actually get a response?
You send this one simple, powerful sentence in an email. That's it. Have you given up on this project? It is crazy effective because it plays on our deep-seated human aversion to loss. Nobody wants to admit they've given up. This question almost forces them to write back and say, no, of course not. We've just been swapped. And just like that, you're back in the game.
So let's wrap this up. What's the big takeaway from all this? It's that no is not failure. No isn't an obstacle. It's a tool. It's the start of the real conversation. The moment we stop desperately chasing yes and start actually welcoming no, we make the other person feel safe. We make them feel in control. And that right there is when real influence, real persuasion happens. It's not about you convincing them of something. It's about creating a space where they can convince themselves.
And that leaves us with one final question for you. Think about your week coming up. Is there a tough conversation, a sales call, maybe even a chat with your family that you've been putting off? How might that whole thing change if, instead of running from no, you walked right up to it and invited it into the conversation?
You know, what if I told you that the most powerful words in any negotiation aren't yes or I agree? Well, today we're going to dive into a pretty amazing psychological tactic, one that comes straight from the high-stakes world of FBI hostage negotiation. And it all boils down to just 2 simple words that can totally change everything. All right, let's set the scene. It's August 2000. We're in the southern Philippines, and the situation, well, it's a full-blown crisis that has the US government and the FBI completely on edge. And right at the heart of it all is one person, Jeffrey Schilling. He's a 24-year-old American who's been captured by a militant Islamic group called Abu Sayyaf. Now, the kidnappers' demand is, well, it's just staggering. $10 million. That's a sum of money that's completely and utterly impossible for Schilling's working-class family back home in California. No way they could raise that. The guy on the other end of the line is Abu Sabaya, the group's leader. And look, he is not some amateur. This is a veteran rebel with a horrifyingly brutal and violent past. He was known for recording his awful acts and then sending the tapes to the media. So the stakes here could not be any higher. The FBI's top-tier crisis negotiation unit is all over this, guiding a Filipino military officer named Benji, who's talking directly to Sabaya. But even with all their expertise, the talks are completely stalled for months. They are going absolutely nowhere. And here's why they were stuck. This is the crucial part. Sabaya had built this unbreakable argument. He refused to call it a ransom. No, he claimed the $10 million was war damages for centuries of injustice against his people. And this framing was, in a twisted way, brilliant. It made him totally immune to any normal kind of bargaining. The FBI was completely boxed in. So what do you do? How in the world do you break an unbreakable argument when someone's life is on the line? Well, the answer is in this profound psychological shift, away from what we think we want to hear and towards two simple, almost magical words. You know, we all just assume the goal is to get the other person to say yes, right? But here's the thing. Elite negotiators know that yes is often pretty meaningless. It can be a way to make you go away, a way to appease you, or just a temporary thing with no real commitment behind it. To really get why yes can be so hollow, check out this unbelievable statistic. Studies have shown that over 90% of patients who have open heart surgery, they say yes when their doctor tells them they need to change their lifestyle. But 2 years down the road, almost none of them have actually done it. Their yes was just a word, not a real commitment to change. And this is it. This is the whole thing. The real breakthrough, that moment of genuine connection, of real influence, it doesn't happen when they say yes. It happens when the other person says, that's right. It's this subtle little light bulb moment where they feel completely and totally understood by you. And listen, this isn't just some clever idea someone came up with. It's part of a proven model that the FBI uses. It's called the Behavioral Change Stairway, and it's basically a roadmap for how you get from just listening to someone to actually changing what they do. So the model has 5 clear stages. It all starts with active listening. I mean, really hearing, not just what they're saying, but what's behind the words. That's what builds empathy, which lets you understand their feelings and see the situation from their side. From there, you can build rapport, a real connection. And only then, once you've done all that, can you start to have influence and guide them toward a real behavioral change. You have to go in order, you can't just skip ahead. So, back to the Philippines. How did this whole theory work out in the real world? Well, after months of being completely stuck, the FBI decided to go all in on this exact strategy. Their goal? To get that one single "that's right" moment from a hardened terrorist. So they basically armed their negotiator, Benji, with a whole arsenal of these active listening tools. Simple things like mirroring Subaya's last few words to get him to keep talking, or labeling his emotions by saying, "It sounds like you feel." But the most powerful weapon in the whole toolkit was the summary, taking everything they'd heard and putting it all together into a clear picture of Subaya's worldview. So Benji gets on the phone, and instead of fighting or arguing, he does the exact opposite. He stops trying to reason with Sabaya and just paints a picture of the world from Sabaya's point of view. He calmly re-articulated all of Sabaya's complaints about 500 years of oppression, the fishing rights, all of it, without a hint of judgment. And after Benji finished his summary, there was just silence on the line. A long, long pause. Almost a full minute of nothing. And then Sabaya spoke, and he said, "That's right." In that moment, he finally, truly felt heard. And the effect? It was immediate. It was like a switch flipped. That $10 million war damages claim, poof, it was gone. From that one phone call onward, Sabaya never mentioned money again. the entire foundation of his argument just dissolved, which is what paved the way for Jeffrey Schilling's eventual rescue. Okay, now this is super important. You have to understand the difference between "that's right" and its weak, deceptive cousin, "you're right." They sound almost the same, but they have the complete opposite effect. Seriously, think about it. When someone is bothering you and you just want them to stop talking and leave you alone, what do you say? "You're right. You're right." It's a polite way of saying, "Please go away." But "that's right." That's a statement of ownership. The other person feels like they came up with the idea themselves, all because you articulated their position so perfectly for them. The author of the book this is all from actually used this on his own son. His son was a football player who just loved to crash headfirst into blockers instead of going around them to make a tackle. And after months of arguing, he finally just said to him, "You seem to think it's unmanly to dodge a block." His son just stopped, thought for a second, and said, "That's right." And in that little moment of self-realization, his entire behavior on the field changed. And that's really the whole point here. This isn't just a technique for FBI negotiators or football coaches. This is a legitimate superpower that you can use in your own life, in sales, at your job, even with your family. So, for example, take this sales rep trying to sell medication to a really skeptical doctor. Instead of just pushing her product, she summarized his passion for his patients. And his response? That's right. The walls just came down, he started to trust her, and she made the sale. Or how about this one? An employee was trying to switch departments. By summarizing his boss's actual needs and concerns, he got a "that's right." And that one moment not only revealed what his boss really cared about, but it also got him the job he wanted. He turned what could have been a fight into a partnership. At the end of the day, the goal isn't to win an argument. It's to understand and be understood. Because when you make someone feel truly heard, you create a space where real change can actually happen. So the question isn't just how you'll use this, but who you'll get to say "that's right" to first.
Today, we are going deep inside the mind of an FBI hostage negotiator to learn a skill that sounds like something out of science fiction: how to bend someone else's reality. Now, this isn't magic. It's not a superpower. It's psychology. And it all starts with a phone call you hope you never get.
Just imagine that for a second. You pick up the phone. It's a Monday morning in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and that's the first thing you hear. Your aunt has just been snatched from her car. Your heart starts pounding, right? Your mind is just a blur. What on earth do you do?
And then they hit you with the number, $150,000. For most people, that's an absolutely impossible sum. And the clock is ticking. The pressure is just immense. And every instinct in your body is screaming at you to do something, anything, to save her.
No, really. Think about it. What's your gut reaction? For the nephew in this real-life case, and honestly for most of us, the immediate thought is you pay them. You find the money, you beg, you borrow, you do whatever it takes. It feels like the only safe path forward. But what if I told you that's the single worst move you could possibly make?
And that right there, that's the core problem. The nephew's first impulse was to pay. And you can't blame him. It's a reaction born out of pure terror. But here's the thing about high-stakes negotiation. What feels safe is very often the most dangerous path you can take.
The truth is, there's always leverage. Always. Negotiation isn't just a simple formula. It's about seeing the hidden needs, the irrational blind spots that we all have. And once you see those, you have the power to change the outcome, even when it feels totally impossible.
So, okay, if paying up is the wrong move, what's the right one? The usual advice is to, what, compromise? Meet in the middle? Maybe offer half, like $75,000? Wrong. And this brings us to probably the most radical and important idea from the negotiator's playbook: never split the difference. Think about it this way. A guy wants to wear his black shoes. His wife wants him to wear his brown shoes. So they compromise, and he wears one black shoe and one brown shoe. Is anyone happy? Of course not. It looks ridiculous. The compromise was literally the worst possible outcome. And here's the key takeaway. We don't compromise because it's the right thing to do. We compromise out of fear. It's just easier, you know? It helps us avoid conflict and pain. But the really great negotiators, they know the creative solutions, the deals that actually make everyone happy, are found by leaning into the hard stuff, not by settling for some easy, awful middle ground. Okay, so if we're not going to pay and we're not going to compromise, what's left? Well, this is where we learn how to bend reality.
And again, this isn't about lying or deception. It's about understanding the predictable, often irrational patterns of the human mind and using them to reframe the entire situation.
This is the absolute key to the whole thing, a concept from prospect theory called loss aversion. All it means is that the fear of losing something is a much more powerful motivator than the possibility of an equal gain. So, to get real leverage, you have to make the other side feel like they have something real to lose if the deal fails. It's not about what they'll get, it's all about what they're about to lose.
And this principle was everything in Haiti. The FBI did some digging and discovered these kidnappers weren't some big political group. Nope, they were basically just local thugs who wanted party money for the weekend. And suddenly, everything changed. Their Friday deadline wasn't a threat anymore. It was a weapon the negotiators could use. The kidnappers now had something to lose, their weekend party plans.
So how do you actually do this? Well, here are a few practical tools. First, you anchor their emotions with what's called an accusation audit. You just list all the bad things they might be thinking about you right up front. It clears the air. Second, you can establish a range to anchor their thinking. Third, you use weirdly specific numbers, like $4,751. It sounds calculated, like you're at your absolute limit. And finally, a surprise gift, no matter how small, can trigger this powerful human need to reciprocate.
All right, now for one of the most powerful, and let's be honest, one of the most dangerous words in any negotiation, the F word. And no, not that one. I'm talking about the word fair. It is a massive emotional trigger, and it can be used against you, or if you know what you're doing, you can use it to your advantage.
To really get its power, just look at the ultimatum game. It's super simple. I give you $10, and you have to offer a split to another person. If they accept your offer, you both get paid. But if they reject it, you both get nothing. Now, logically, you should accept any offer, right? Even $1 is better than $0. But that is not what happens in the real world.
In reality, most offers under about $2.50 get flat-out rejected. Think about that. People would rather get literally nothing than accept a deal they feel is unfair. It is definitive proof that the feeling of being treated unfairly is more powerful than the rational value of free money. Our emotions drive the bus, not logic.
So here's how you handle it. When someone says, "We just want what's fair," they're usually accusing you of being unfair. Don't fall for it. Just say, "Okay, I apologize. Let's go back to the part where you think I was being unfair." It completely disarms them. And if they say, "We've given you a fair offer," you just repeat it back to them as a calm question. Fair? That puts the pressure on them to justify it, and you get more information.
So let's see how all of this comes together in the real world. We're going to go from the absolute chaos of that Haiti kidnapping to a conversation you might actually have next week, asking for a raise. Because believe it or not, the principles are exactly the same.
Let's go back to that terrifying initial demand. The family is in a full-blown panic, but the negotiator has a plan. They tell the nephew not to say no, but instead to start gently questioning the fairness of the whole situation.
So the nephew gets back on the phone, and he calmly asks, "How are we supposed to pay you anything if you're going to hurt her?" It's a simple, empathetic question that challenges their sense of what's right. And in response, boom, the kidnappers immediately drop their demand by 2/3.
They keep this up. The nephew asks, "How can I possibly come up with that kind of money?" Notice, it's never a no. It's a genuine question that challenges their perspective. And what happens? The kidnappers drop their price in half again. At this point, they're basically just negotiating with themselves. And here's the master stroke. The nephew finally makes his first real offer, an extreme low anchor, way down at $3,000. The kidnappers are shocked, but they come down to 10 grand. Then the nephew counters with this incredibly specific, odd number, $4,751. It sounds so calculated, so precise, like it's every last penny he has. They accepted. They even threw in a CD stereo they found in the car, and the ant was returned, totally safe.
So how does this work for you when you're asking for a raise? Well, first, be pleasantly persistent about the non-salary stuff, like maybe more vacation time or a better title. It gets other things on the table. Then, you define what success looks like in your job. This sets the stage for your next raise before you even get this one. And finally, ask your boss, what does it take to be successful here? Just like that, you've made them invested in your success. You've turned them into an ally.
So the next time you find yourself at a crossroads, doesn't matter if it's for a car, a contract, or your career,
I want you to remember the mismatched shoes. Remember the kidnappers who just wanted weekend party money. The real question is, are you going to fall back on the easy compromise, or are you going to use these tools to bend reality?
So let's talk about a negotiation technique that is so powerful, it was actually born from one of the most painful failures in FBI history. It's a method that flips everything you think you know about negotiation completely on its head. It comes from the work of former lead hostage negotiator Chris Voss. And it all started with a disaster. I mean, that's literally how Voss described the outcome of this one particular 13-month-long hostage situation. It wasn't just bad, it was a complete and utter disaster. But, you know, sometimes our biggest failures lead to our biggest breakthroughs. And this one? Well, it led to a critical realization. We're about to unpack how the lessons from this crisis created a revolutionary communication tool, one that you can actually use in your own life. Okay, so let's set the scene. The year is 2001. The place is the Philippines. It was called the Dos Palmas hostage crisis. And I mean, this thing was a negotiator's worst nightmare, right from the very beginning. Just look at the ingredients here. You've got 20 hostages, 3 of them Americans, taken by a brutal terrorist group. Then the Philippine president immediately declares all-out war, which just throws gasoline on the fire. And on top of that, you've got the FBI, the CIA, and the Philippine military all fighting over turf. Yeah, a total recipe for disaster. So after 13 long, agonizing months, the crisis finally ends in a rescue mission. But it was completely botched. American hostage Martin Burnham was killed, not by the kidnappers, but by 3 bullets from his supposed rescuers. The whole confrontational, strong-arm approach had failed in the most tragic way imaginable. Okay, so a failure this big, it forces you to rethink everything. The old way of seeing negotiation, as this wrestling match where you just try to wear your opponent down, that was clearly fundamentally broken. The new way had to be different. It had to be more like a conversation, where the goal is to actually get your counterpart to solve your problem for you. So where did this new approach come from? You'd think it would be from some high-level training seminar or a fancy textbook, right? Nope. The key insight came from the ashes of Dos Palmas and a totally unexpected discovery in a really bizarre case back in the US. Get this. The situation was so weird it was almost funny. One drug dealer kidnaps another one's girlfriend. And what does the boyfriend do? He calls the FBI for help. Seriously. So while the agents are listening to the negotiation tapes from this very strange case, one single sentence just changes everything. Now, listen to that again. The drug dealer, with 0 coaching from the FBI, just blurts this out. Notice what it isn't. It's not a demand. It's not an accusation. It's just a simple, genuine, open-ended question. And the effect? It was absolutely stunning. The kidnapper on the other end of the line just went silent for a few seconds, completely caught off guard. And then he just volunteered to put the girlfriend on the phone. He thought it was his own brilliant idea to offer proof of life. And that, right there, was a massive win, and it was achieved without giving up a single thing. So what was going on here? What was the magic? Why was this one clumsy question from a total amateur more effective than anything the trained professionals had been trying? Well, it wasn't magic at all. It was psychology. The real secret to gaining the upper hand in any negotiation is to give the other side the illusion of control. It works because it taps into this really deep human need for autonomy. I mean, think about it. Nobody likes being told what to do, right? We resist. But when you ask a question that invites someone to solve a problem, you hand them that feeling of control, and their defenses just melt away. And this is the heart of the whole technique that Voss developed. He calls them calibrated questions. These are basically carefully crafted, open-ended questions that are designed to completely remove aggression from a conversation, making your counterpart feel like they're in the driver's seat, even though you were the one quietly steering the conversation. Let me give you a really clear example. Imagine you're a doctor, and a patient wants to leave the hospital against medical advice. If you say, "You can't leave," what happens? You've just started a fight. But what if you ask, "What do you hope to achieve by leaving?" See the difference? One's a showdown, the other's an invitation to solve a problem together. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually do it? How can you start building these kinds of questions for your own life, whether you're dealing with your boss, your partner, or even trying to get a better deal on a car? It's actually pretty simple. It really just boils down to 3 basic rules. First, try to start your questions with how or what. These words naturally open up their thinking. Second, and this is a big one, you have to avoid the word why. In pretty much every language, why sounds like an accusation. Think about it. When someone asks, why did you do that? You immediately get defensive. And third, you frame the question so their answer helps them solve your problem. So let's look at a few quick transformations. Instead of that accusatory, why did you do that? You could ask, what caused you to do that? Instead of a simple yes or no question like, does this look good? Try, how does this look to you? You're not just swapping out words here. You're fundamentally changing who's in control of the conversation. And here are a few of my favorites, kind of a go-to toolkit you can use almost anywhere. What about this is important to you? Is fantastic for uncovering what really motivates them. And the big one, how am I supposed to do that? That one is unbelievably powerful. It gently forces your counterpart to see the problem from your perspective and start helping you solve it. And look, this isn't just for high-stakes FBI stuff. A PR consultant used how am I supposed to do that and got a massive overdue invoice paid in less than 48 hours. Voss himself used one of these questions on his own FBI boss to get a training trip approved. The applications are, well, they're everywhere. So what's the big idea, the core philosophy that ties all of this together? Well, you can sum it up in just 2 words: listener's judo. I want you to think about this for a second. Who really has the control in a conversation? The person who's talking and giving away information, or the person who's listening and quietly guiding the conversation where they want it to go? It's the listener, of course. Listener's judo is all about using your counterpart's energy for your own benefit. All right, so let's wrap this up with the key takeaways. This is the stuff you can start using today. Stop trying to force people to admit you're right. Instead, give them that illusion of control by asking those how and what questions. Guide them to come up with your solution. And maybe the most important part, when you feel attacked, just pause, bite your tongue, and instead of reacting, ask another calibrated question. See, by asking instead of telling, you can guide pretty much any conversation you want without it ever feeling like a fight. So the next time you walk into any kind of negotiation, whether it's for a raise or just deciding where to go for dinner, remember the power of listener's judo. The question isn't if someone will be in control. The question is, will it be you? You know that feeling, right? You've just nailed a negotiation, you got the yes, you shake hands, maybe you even celebrate a little. And then, crickets. Nothing happens. Well, today we're diving into a masterclass from former FBI negotiator Chris Voss on how to turn that yes into actual, concrete action. This right here, this quote is the heart of it all. It's this incredibly simple but powerful idea that just getting someone to agree with you is only half the battle. The real magic is in making sure it actually gets done. And to see why this is so critical, let's look at a situation where forgetting to ask how almost ended in total disaster. So, picture this: a chaotic prison siege in Louisiana. You've got a group of armed, totally disorganized inmates who've taken the warden hostage. They're on edge, they're scared, and things could go sideways at any second. Now, the negotiators on the outside can tell the inmates are looking for a way out, but they're terrified they're going to get beaten the moment they surrender. Okay, so they come up with a plan. The negotiators give the inmates 2 walkie-talkies. Here's the deal. One inmate will walk out, go past all 3 police perimeters, get into a paddy wagon, and then, and this is the important part, he'll use the walkie-talkie to tell everyone else inside that it's safe to come out. Everyone agrees. Simple, right? Yes. But just as the first guy is about to step into the wagon, an officer who wasn't briefed on the plan sees the walkie-talkie and, thinking it's contraband, he snatches it. Back inside, just silence. The inmates start to panic. They think their friend is being beaten, or worse. They get on the radio and threaten to start cutting off the warden's fingers. The entire deal is literally seconds from imploding. Whew. Okay, so the crisis was averted, but just barely. And it was all because one SWAT guy, probably thinking he was doing a great job finding the idiot's radio, nearly got people killed. This is a perfect, if terrifying, example of why your job is never done when you get an agreement. You haven't succeeded until the hostage is free, until the deal is signed, until the money is in the bank. And that means you have to be more than just a negotiator. You have to become what Voss calls a decision architect. Think about that. You're not just getting a yes. You're designing the entire process. thinking through every single step of implementation, and making sure that everyone, right down to the guy on the perimeter, knows the plan. Because as we saw, yes is absolutely nothing without how. So how do you do it? How would you actually architect that execution? Well, the single most powerful tool in your entire toolbox is the calibrated how question. It's this brilliant, gentle way to say no while actually making your counterpart solve your problems for you. Let's see how it works in a really high-stakes situation. An American eco tour guide named Jose gets kidnapped by rebels in Ecuador. They're demanding a $5 million ransom. His wife, Julie, becomes the lead negotiator, and she's being coached by the FBI. Now, instead of telling her to argue or say no, they tell her to use this new, kind of untested strategy based entirely on one word: how. So every time the kidnappers make a demand, Julie just responds with a question. How do I even know Jose is still alive? When they demand the money, she says, we don't have that kind of money. How are we supposed to raise that much? What's so amazing about this is that it forced the kidnappers to stop, to think, and to actually engage with her reality. It gave them the illusion of control, but she was the one pulling the strings, stalling for time and making them negotiate with themselves. And this leads to an incredibly powerful sequence you can use anytime. You can actually say no 4 times before you ever have to use the word itself. You start with, how am I supposed to do that? And you escalate gently from there. Each step pushes back a little bit more, but it does it in a way that invites them to solve the problem with you, forcing them to keep bidding against themselves without blowing up the deal. Now, here's a really crucial point. Jose eventually managed to escape. Why? Because Julie's constant how questions created so much confusion and delay inside the kidnappers' own group that their command structure just fell apart. And this reveals a whole hidden layer of negotiation, the people who aren't even in the room. Voss calls these the level 2 players. We're talking about the spouses, the bosses, the lawyers, the team members, anyone who has the power to kill your deal after you've walked out of the room. Ignoring them is probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make. You have to ask questions like, how does this decision affect the rest of your team? You've got to bring their influence out into the open. Let's just look at this side by side. In one case, Voss's team got a yes from a CEO in Florida, but they totally ignored a key division head behind the scenes. Well, that guy felt disrespected, and he torpedoed the entire deal. Now contrast that with the Ecuador kidnapping. Julie's how questions forced the entire rebel group to deal with her problems, which led to their own internal collapse and gave Jose a chance to escape. The difference is night and day. Okay, so you've thought about the whole team, you've navigated the negotiation, and you finally get a yes. How do you know if it's a real yes? Because, let's be honest, a yes can mean a whole lot of different things, and you need to become an expert at telling them apart. So there's this famous study by Professor Albert Mehrabian that found communication is only about 7% the actual words you use. The vast majority of meaning comes from your tone of voice and your body language. So if you hear someone say yes, but their voice trails off, or they're crossing their arms, that's a huge red flag. The words and the music just don't match. And that's usually because there are 3 different kinds of yes. First, you've got the counterfeit yes. That's what people use when they just want you to go away. Then there's the confirmation yes, which is just a simple response like, yes, I got your email. What you're hunting for, the only one that matters, is the commitment yes, a true agreement that's actually going to lead to action. So how do you get that real commitment? Use the rule of 3. It's simple. You get them to agree to the same thing in 3 different ways. First, they say yes to your proposal. Second, you summarize or label what they agreed to, and you're aiming to get them to say, that's right. And third, you hit them with a calibrated how question about implementation, like, okay, so how do we make this happen? It's really, really hard to fake it 3 times. All right, so when you put all these tools together, the how questions, influencing the team behind the table, and triple-checking every yes, you get to the holy grail of negotiation. You make your solution feel like it was their idea all along. Let's see how this works in a normal business dispute. Meet Joaquin and Bruno. They're partners in a grow shop over in Spain, but the partnership has gone sour. Bruno wants out, so he hires a professional representative who comes in hot with what looks like a very firm, take-it-or-leave-it offer to buy out his half of the business. And this was the demand, exactly 30,812 euros. Now look at that number. It's not round, is it? That's a classic tactic. It's designed to make the offer seem like it's based on some super precise, complex calculation, which makes it feel non-negotiable. Joaquin had made an offer first, and this was an aggressive counter designed to put him in a corner.
But Joaquin didn't panic. He didn't make a new counteroffer. He just used that graceful four-step no method we just talked about. He'd respond with empathy, saying things like, "Your offer is very generous. I just wish I could afford it." And with each polite refusal, Bruno's advisor had to do all the work, lowering the price again and again. And the final number? It was exactly Joaquin's original target, paid out on his own terms.
And this just nails the core principle, doesn't it? By using these calibrated questions and a graceful no, Joaquin guided Bruno to the solution that he wanted all along, but he made Bruno's team feel like they proposed it. And because they felt like they came up with it, they owned it. And because they owned it, there was no fight during implementation. That is the art of letting them have your way. So the next time you get to yes, I want you to remember that prison siege and that walkie-talkie. Your work has only just begun. The big takeaway here is this: don't just be a closer, be a decision architect, because that's how you guarantee not just an agreement, but real, tangible success. Look, we all have to negotiate at some point, right? Whether you're buying a car, asking for a raise, or just trying to keep your rent from going up. But what if you could stop dreading it? What if you could turn that whole awkward confrontation into a game you can actually win? Well, today we're going to break down the art of bare-knuckle bargaining so you can get what you really want. And let's be real, that's exactly what a tough negotiation feels like, doesn't it? It's that punch in the mouth that just completely vaporizes all your careful planning. But what if I told you there's a way to take that punch and even know how to punch back effectively? All right, to see exactly how this works, let's jump into a story. Our hero here is a former FBI agent, Chris Voss, and he's just found his dream car, a gorgeous salsa red pearl Toyota 4Runner. I mean, this thing is perfect. The only problem? It's the only one in the entire DC area, and you better believe the dealer knows it. Voss is hungry, and they've got the only food in town. The stakes are high. So, the salesman, let's call him Stan, he slides over that sticker price with a big old grin. $36,000. Stan thinks he's got him hook, line, and sinker. And this is the first punch we were talking about. It's meant to knock you off balance, to make you question everything you thought you knew. But Voss? He doesn't even blink. He just calmly counters with his all-cash offer. $30,000. Now, this isn't some angry lowball offer. It's more like a gentle rattle of the cage. He's not arguing. He's just stating his limit. And you can just see that confident smile on Stan's face start to, flicker. Okay, and this is where the real dance begins. Stan, the dealer, comes back with $34,000. But watch this. Voss doesn't attack the price. No, instead, he uses empathy. He says things like, "Wow, this is so embarrassing. I simply can't do that." He even says, "The truck is worth more. I just can't do that." See what he's doing? He's making the salesman feel heard and respected, but he is not budging on his number. Not 1 inch. And the result of all this? Total victory. Voss drives off the lot in that beautiful red truck for his original price. He saved $6,000 just by changing his approach. Now look, this wasn't magic. It was a system. It was a set of psychological tools that, and this is the important part, anyone can learn. So the big question is, how did he pull that off? And more importantly, how can you use these exact same tactics in your next negotiation? Let's break it all down. Okay, first things first. Before you even think about throwing out a number, you have to figure out who you're talking to. See, people usually fall into one of 3 main negotiator types. And trust me, understanding their style, that's the key that unlocks this whole thing. So let's take a quick look at these 3 types. You've got the analyst. For them, time is all about preparation. Then there's the accommodator, who sees time as a chance to build a relationship. And finally, you have the assertive type, who's thinking time is money. And get this, just look at how they handle silence. An analyst uses it to think. An accommodator panics, thinking you're angry. And an assertive, they just see it as their turn to talk more. Totally different worlds. So let's dive into the analyst first. These are your data nerds, your spreadsheet people. They're super methodical, they absolutely hate surprises, and they need time to process information. So if you find yourself across the table from an analyst, you need to bring facts and figures. Do not try to wing it, and whatever you do, don't rush them. Silence is actually your best friend here because it gives them the space they need to think things through. All right, next up, we have the accommodator. For them, it's all about the relationship. They want to be your friend. They love a good win-win, and honestly, they'll often give stuff away just to keep things pleasant and avoid conflict. So the key with them, be friendly, be sociable, build that rapport. But, and this is a big but, you have to use smart questions to gently guide all that goodwill into an actual solid agreement. And finally, we have the assertive negotiator. You know this person. Time is money, and their number one goal is winning. Now listen up, because this is the most important part. They literally cannot hear what you're saying until they feel heard. So you have to use special tools like mirrors and labels to show them you get where they're coming from. Your whole goal is to get them to say the magic words, "That's right." The second they say that, it's like a switch flips, and they suddenly become open to what you have to say.
And all of this leads to a really important, kind of mind-blowing rule. The golden rule? It's totally wrong, at least in negotiation. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We tend to assume other people are like us, but there's a 2/3 chance they're a completely different type. So the new rule is, don't treat others how you want to be treated, treat them how they need to be treated. You have to adapt to their world, not the other way around. Okay, so you've figured out their type, you're ready. But then, bam, they throw out that first absolutely insane number, the one that makes you want to just walk away. Let's talk about how you take that punch without getting knocked out cold. Yeah, this move has a name. It's called an extreme anchor. It's a number that is so ridiculously high or low that it's designed to emotionally hijack you. The goal is to make you totally lose confidence in your own research, panic, and immediately jump to your highest possible price. It's basically a psychological shock and awe campaign. So how do you fight back? First rule, don't get angry. Stay calm and use a very polite, almost deferential question like, how am I supposed to do that? That simple question forces them to explain themselves, and it does it without starting a fight. Another option? Just pivot away from price entirely. You could say something like, you know what, let's put price off to the side for just a moment. Let's talk about what would make this a really good deal. Just like that, you've changed the subject away from their crazy number and back to the value you're discussing. All right, you've taken their best shot and you're still standing. Now it's time to go on the offensive. And we're not talking about just random haggling here. This is a precise step-by-step system. It's called the Ackerman bargaining method, and it is powerful. Here's the playbook. Step 1, set your target price. This is your real goal. Step 2, your first offer should be your own extreme anchor. Start at 65% of your target. Then, and this is the genius part, you plan out 3 raises, but each raise gets smaller. You might go to 85%, then 95%, and finally 100%. These shrinking jumps send a powerful psychological signal that they are squeezing every last penny out of you. And for the grand finale, you make your final offers with really precise, non-round numbers, and you throw in a non-monetary item. That's the signal that you are absolutely, positively at your limit. Okay, theory is one thing, right? But let's see how this plays out in a situation we can all relate to. Forget about fancy cars for a minute. Let's talk about something really practical, negotiating your rent. So here's the scenario. A student gets that dreaded notice from his landlord. His rent is jumping from $1,850 all the way up to $2,000 a month. Ouch. He loves the apartment, but that's just too much. So he does his homework and sets a realistic target price for himself, $1,830. So he puts the Ackerman plan into action. He starts with his own extreme anchor, $1,730. The agent kind of laughs, but then counters at $1,950. See that? He's already dropped $50. Then the student makes his next pre-planned, smaller jump up to $1,810. After a little more back and forth, he gets ready to make his final killer move. And here it is, the knockout punch. It's not $1,830. It's not even $1,825. His final offer is $1,829. That precision, that's what makes this so incredibly powerful. And just listen to the agent's reaction. That weirdly specific number gives the offer this incredible weight of credibility. It sounds like a number that's been carefully calculated, not just one he pulled out of thin air. So the agent just assumes, wow, this kid has done his math down to the very last dollar. And he accepts it. The student not only avoided a huge rent hike, he actually got a rent decrease. Amazing. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, it's where the real truth and creativity come out. Just remember this. The person across the table isn't your enemy. The unsolved issue
is the enemy. Once you know how to diagnose their type, deflect their punches, and use a clear game plan like the Ackerman method, you can turn what feels like a fight into, well, a productive collaboration. So the only question left is, what unsolved issue are you going to tackle next? Okay, let's dive into a negotiation concept that can completely change the game. I mean, it's a tool so powerful it can turn a deadly standoff into a peaceful surrender. But to really get it, we've got to go back to a tragedy that showed just how desperately it was needed. All right, picture this. We're in Rochester, New York. It's June 17th, 1981. A man named William Griffin, after a horrific shooting spree at his home, has stormed a local bank and taken 9 employees hostage. And this situation is just explosive right from the get-go. The morning just spirals into chaos with terrifying speed. Griffin has already killed multiple people before he even walks into the bank. By 2:30 p.m., after hours of just shooting at anyone who gets near, he forces the bank manager to deliver this stark ultimatum to the police, setting a deadline for 3 p.m. sharp. This was the message, delivered through the terrified bank manager. And it was a simple, brutal choice. A shootout in the parking lot at 3 o'clock, or he would start executing the hostages. No demands for money, no calls for a helicopter, nothing like that. Just this deadline. Now here's the thing. The FBI had a playbook for this. They had this core belief, what they called a known known, that deadlines were just a tactic. They were a tool for the bad guy to focus the negotiator's mind, not a real promise. This was just standard procedure. So for the FBI on the scene, everything came down to one single question. Is this guy bluffing? I mean, all their experience, all their data, everything they knew pointed to yes. They were expecting him to eventually pick up the phone and start a real conversation. But at exactly 3 p.m., that established truth just shatters. Griffin shot and killed Margaret Moore, a 29-year-old teller. He wasn't bluffing, not at all. The unthinkable happened, and law enforcement was left stunned, forced to ask themselves a terrifying question. How did we get this so wrong? How were we so blind? You see, the tragedy in Rochester exposed this lethal danger of not seeing something called a black swan. This incident forced a complete rethink of negotiation strategy. So what is a black swan, anyway? Okay, so a black swan, it isn't just something unlikely. No, it's something you never even thought to look for in the first place. It's a piece of information that's so far outside your own worldview, you don't even know that you don't know it. But man, once you find it, it changes the entire game. And this table, it breaks it down perfectly. We spend most of our time dealing with what we know. And what we know we don't know, the wild cards. But black swans, they live in that third column, that total blind spot. And that's where the most game-changing information is always hiding. And looking back, you can see it. The clues in the Griffin case, they were there the whole time. He refused to talk, he'd already killed people without asking for anything, and a note he left literally spelled out his plan. His real goal wasn't escape, it was suicide by cop. That was the black swan. But the FBI just couldn't see it because it didn't fit their script. So, okay, how does this actually work in practice? Well, discovering these black swans, that's the key to unlocking the most powerful forms of leverage you can have in any negotiation, from the boardroom all the way to your own home. Think of black swans like leverage multipliers. They basically supercharge your options. They boost your ability to give your counterpart something they want, that's positive leverage, to show them what they stand to lose, that's negative leverage, and probably the most powerful of all, to use their own worldview and standards to persuade them. That's what we call normative leverage. All right, let's see this in action. We're going to fast forward to a different standoff. But this time, the FBI has learned that hard lesson from Rochester. And believe me, the outcome could not be more different. So it's 2003. A tobacco farmer named Dwight Watson drives his tractor right into a pond on the National Mall, claiming it's packed with explosives. He's telling reporters God told him to do it, that he's ready to die, and he's got the entire capital city on lockdown. It's a huge deal. But this time, instead of just writing him off as crazy, the FBI starts to listen. They start digging into his worldview, his religion, as the source material calls it. They find out he's a devout Christian.
They learn he's a veteran with this very specific code of honor. He couldn't surrender before 3 days had passed. And here's the kicker. They figure out he actually wants to live.
And then one of the agents on the team, Winnie Miller, has this brilliant insight. She finds the black swan. She connects his Christian faith to his military rule. She realizes that the third day has a profound religious meaning for him. This was the key. So they presented this idea to Watson. They didn't threaten him, they didn't argue, they just framed his surrender within his own belief system, giving him an honorable way out. And just like that, the black swan didn't just prevent a tragedy, it created a path to a peaceful resolution. So here's the big point, right? What do you do when the person you're negotiating with seems completely irrational, when nothing they say or do makes any sense?
You know, our first instinct is to throw our hands up. They're crazy, right? We just label them and we shut down. But that's a huge mistake. That's the exact moment you should be leaning in and getting curious, not backing away. See, when someone seems crazy, it's usually just a clue that one of 3 things is going on. 1, they're working with bad information. 2, they're constrained by some pressure or rule that you can't see. Or 3, they have completely different interests that you haven't uncovered yet. Your job isn't to judge them as irrational. It's to be a detective and figure out why they seem that way. Because when you dig into their information, their constraints, and their hidden interests, that's how you find the black swan that can unlock the entire negotiation and show you the way forward.
So the next time you're in a difficult conversation, whether it's for a multi-million-dollar deal or just figuring out dinner plans, and you're tempted to think the other person is just being crazy, stop. And instead ask yourself, what is the piece of information I don't know that would change everything? Hey, welcome. Today, we are going to walk through a super powerful but really simple tool that will completely change how you prepare for any negotiation. I'm talking about asking for a raise, buying a car, closing a huge deal, anything. It's called the Negotiation One Sheet, and it's going to give you a serious edge. Let's get into it. This quote right here says it all. It's from Chris Voss, who used to be the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. Think about that. He's saying that in those high-pressure moments, you don't magically become a superstar. You just fall back on how well you prepared. Preparation is your safety net. It's everything. All right, so here's the plan. First, we're going to look at why most preparation actually fails. Then, we'll build our one sheet together, step by step, defining your goal, mapping out the conversation, shaping how they think, and then, the really fun part, finding ways to expand the pie. Okay, let's start with section 1. We've got to break down the old way of doing things, because the way most people prep for negotiation is, well, it's actually setting them up to get a mediocre deal from the get-go. So what do you think it is? What's the #1 mistake people make? I mean, think about it. When you're getting ready to talk money, what's the one thing everyone tells you to know? Your bottom line, right? Your walkaway number. Well, what if I told you that focusing on that is the single biggest trap you can fall into? You know, there's a fancy term for this. BATNA. It stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. It's your plan B. Let's say you're selling your car and you already have an offer for $10,000. That's your BATNA. It's the absolute minimum you'll accept. And for decades, this has been the centerpiece of negotiation prep. But here's the massive problem with that. When you spend all your energy obsessing over your walkaway point, it becomes your target. It's a psychological trick you play on yourself. That $10,000 floor becomes a ceiling. You get so focused on not losing that you completely forget what it takes to actually win. You end up with what the pros call a wimp win. Okay, so if focusing on our bottom line is a dead end, what do the real pros do? How do the best of the best get ready for these make or break conversations? Well, they use a really simple but structured approach. And that brings us to the first, and honestly, the most important part of the negotiation one sheet. It all starts with a huge mental shift, away from what you're willing to accept and toward what you are going to achieve. And get this, the payoff for doing this kind of prep is just staggering. Research shows that for every single hour you spend on this targeted preparation, you save at least 7 hours down the road. 7. That's time you're not spending renegotiating or cleaning up a messy deal. It's a huge return on investment. So the very first thing that goes on your one sheet is your goal. Now, sure, you should think through the best and worst case scenarios just to know the landscape, but the key is this. You only write down one thing, a specific, ambitious, but still reasonable best case scenario goal. And there are 4 really simple steps to make this goal stick. First, you define it, make it super clear. Second, you write it down. The act of writing makes it real. Third, you tell someone, like a coworker. That creates accountability, and it makes it way harder to back down when you're feeling the pressure. And fourth, you literally carry that written goal into the negotiation with you.
Because here's the bottom line. Decades of research have shown, without a doubt, that people who set specific, ambitious goals simply get better results. You're priming your own brain for success. You anchor high, and that changes the entire game.
All right, you've got your goal. Now what? In this next section, we're going to cover 2 more parts of the one sheet. This is about preparing the actual flow of the conversation. It's not about writing a script. It's about having the right tools in your pocket ready to go.
The second section of your one sheet is the summary. What you do here is write out a summary of the situation from their point of view. You want to articulate their position so well that the only thing they can say back is, "That's right." When you hear "that's right," you struck gold. It means they feel heard and understood, and that's the foundation for a real conversation. Next up, in section 3, we have labels. This is where you prepare for what's called an accusation audit. Sounds intense, but it's simple. You basically guess what their fears or accusations might be, and you say them out loud first. You take the sting out of it. By calmly saying something like, "It seems like you're reluctant to move forward on this," you show empathy and you totally disarm them. It's an incredibly effective way to lower their defenses right away. Okay, now we are getting to the really good stuff. Section 4 is all about how you use questions, not just to get answers, but to actually guide the other person's thinking and lead them toward your solution. These are called calibrated questions. They're open-ended questions that almost always start with what or how. You're avoiding why, which can sound accusatory. Instead, you're asking questions that make them pause, think, and reveal what's really driving them. You're basically getting them to solve your problems for you. And here are some absolute killers you can use in almost any situation. Like, what are we really trying to accomplish here? That pulls you both back to the same side of the table. Or one of my favorites, what's the biggest challenge you're facing? Suddenly, you're not an adversary, you're a problem solver. And then there's, what happens if you do nothing? This one is brilliant because it forces them to think about the cost of not making a deal. It puts the ball in their court. And that brings us to our last section of the one sheet. This is the creative part. This is where you move beyond just fighting over price and find hidden value that can unlock a deal that seemed impossible. You would be shocked at how many negotiations get stuck, not because of the money, but because of things that have nothing to do with it. We're talking about ego, status, respect, or just the fear of looking bad to their boss. The final section of your one sheet prepares you for exactly this. So in this last section, you brainstorm a list of non-cash items that the other side could offer you, things that might be low cost for them, but high value for you. Do they have a huge social media platform? Can they give you a public testimonial? Could they offer better payment terms? This is how you stop fighting over a small slice and start making the whole pie bigger. This right here is the magic question that unlocks all that creativity. For instance, the author who developed this was once negotiating a speaking fee. He realized that what he really valued was publicity. So he asked for a cover story in their magazine. For them, it was easy. For his business, it was priceless. That's the kind of creative, non-cash thinking that gets deals done. And that's it. That is the entire one sheet. 1 page, 5 simple sections. The goal, the summary, the labels, the calibrated questions, and the non-cash offers. This isn't a script you have to memorize. It's a toolkit. It keeps you focused, it saves you an insane amount of time, and it gives you this calm sense of control when you're under pressure. So as we wrap up, I'm just going to leave you with this thought. Your next big negotiation is probably just around the corner, whether you realize it or not. You could prepare the old way by focusing on your walkaway point, or you can prepare the new way. Prepare to win. So how are you going to prepare?